So I'd like to tell you about the Equality Act and why it's important for schools, what schools need to do, and also to tell you about a new service that the HR team is offering to schools to help schools comply with their obligations under the Act and also to help schools comply with their statutory equality duties. The Equality Act provides protection from discrimination to individuals. It's actually a consolidating piece of legislation, which means it brings together all the previous equality laws, such as the Disability Discrimination Act, the Race Relations Act and the Sex Discrimination Act. It confirms types of discrimination. It also extends protection from discrimination in some areas, and schools do need to know about those extended protections. So there are 4 types of discrimination under the Act, but there are actually 6 as far as disability is concerned. The Act applies to aspects of a person's identity referred to in the Act as protected characteristics, and there are 9 protected characteristics. The Equality Act applies to all schools and all academies, and it's important because it doesn't just impact on the way schools treat their staff, but it also impacts on the way that schools treat their pupils and also the wider school community. So the Act is also really important because it introduced a single public sector equality duty, and that equality duty applies to all schools. The duty has applied to schools since April 2011, and in addition to the public sector equality duty, schools are also bound by specific equality duties, which basically mean that schools need to publish equality information and also need to publish 1 or more equality objectives that are relevant to their particular school. Equality is really important for schools because it's mandatory. So schools have to comply with their obligations under the Act and also their equality duties. It can be very costly if schools get it wrong, and there have been a number of high-profile cases recently involving schools. It can be costly in terms of adverse publicity as well as the cost of compensation, but it also can be costly in terms of an impact on a school's Ofsted grading. Equality is absolutely integral to the Ofsted framework, the 2015 framework. It's throughout the framework, it's referred to throughout the framework, and if schools get it wrong, it will impact on their grading as far as Ofsted inspections are concerned. It also overlaps with a number of other school duties. So things like the duty to promote community cohesion, the duty to promote British values, obligations under the Human Rights Act, and the duty to promote SMSC in schools. So it overlaps with many other duties as well. The new regulations are the Equality Act 2010, Specific Duties and Public Authorities Regulations 2017, and those regulations were introduced largely to introduce gender pay reporting, but what they also do is that they reinforce the obligation to publish equality objectives. Now, by now schools should already be onto at least the second set of equality objectives under the old regulations. If they're not, schools have until the 30th of March 2018 to publish specific equality objectives. Well, equality objectives will be different for every school. It'll be based on the issues, the equality issues that are important to their school, and will be based largely on the school's analysis of their own equality data. So equality objectives must be SMART. They must be specific and they must be measurable. So in other words, they mustn't be vague and they mustn't be flimsy. The regulations don't actually say where objectives should be published. It's basically up to schools to decide. I think that the simplest suggestion, and this is something that the DFE advised too, is that the school sets up an equalities page on their website where all their information about equality is contained, and that the objectives are referred to on the equalities page. So schools need to make sure that they are complying with their obligations under the public sector equality duty. They need to make sure that they've published equality objectives. They need to make sure that all their staff are aware of their obligations under the Equality Act, and that also the staff, pupils and the wider school community understands their commitment to equality. Two really important things, I think, though, are that schools must make sure that all their staff, from top to bottom, and that includes school governors too, that all their staff have been given equality training so that they know what their obligations under the Equality Act are and what's expected of them in terms of standards of behaviour. The other thing I think that's also really important is that schools should have an equality policy. We can provide schools with an equality assessment, which basically entails either myself or one of the other advisors in the team coming out to school and working through an assessment document to basically assess how far and to how well the school is complying with its obligations under the Equality Act, and in particular with statutory equality duties. So the assessment is broken down into 6 key areas, and at the end of the assessment a report is provided to the school so that they can see what their compliance looks like, and also so they can see what areas need to be looked at and any areas that need to be addressed. We can also provide schools with equality training, and we can do this either as training for the whole school, which is general training on the Equality Act, looking at things like the types of discrimination, protected characteristics, and giving schools specific examples. Or we can provide more specific training to the school governors and senior leadership team in relation to their management responsibilities, and also in relation to what's expected of them as far as compliance with their equality duties is concerned. So essentially we're here to help. We can provide support as schools need it. And of course, don't forget that we do have the HR helpline, which is available 5 days a week from 8:30 till 5, and our advisors are always there to support schools on managing day-to-day equality issues.